Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's third in a series of webinars on the Prescriptive online Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency 90-day Action Plan Tool. Taking less than 30 minutes of your leadership's times to build a tailored action plan aligned to your business model. We appreciate that you're taking the time today to attend today's webinar to build this evolving resilient enterprise, especially in light of coronavirus and especially after the holidays. Thank you for joining us. We hope that your family is healthy and safe. Again, this is the third webinar in our series on risk appetite. Last webinar was on risk maturity model. Our first webinar was on the online Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency 90-day Action Plan overall program. And our upcoming webinar third webinar will be on operational propensity. That'll be on February 8th. So mark your calendars. Again, we look forward to a great webinar, and please do log in to polev.com, Greg Schlegel, 910. Please use your web-enabled browser so that you can participate. This is the best way to participate. There will be polling and ranking in this webinar. It works very nicely if you log into it on another screen or on your cell phone using a browser. So my name again is Jim Vries. I am founder, president of Enhance International Group. I work very closely with Greg to support on building this supply chain risk and resiliency program. We have Jenny Fromm and Claire Fitcham and Cindy Lee Voss from Uphaven will all be here with us to help coordinate your questions. So please get your questions ready and put them into the chat or Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. Joining again with us is Greg Schlegel. He'll be sharing his vast experience. Greg is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency and will be helping us, and I will be helping facilitate this webinar. So Greg, could you please introduce yourself?
You bet, Jim. Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here with all of you to talk about our passion. As Jim mentioned, I'm the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We're 12 years young, all good. We'll talk more about the consortium in a subsequent slide. I teach supply chain risk management at Lehigh University, and I teach ERM, enterprise risk management, at Villanova University here in the States. Spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant and practice lead. Spent 30 plus years as a supply chain exec for a couple of Fortune 100 manufacturers. I've taught supply chain management at 6 different universities and was president of Apex, now ASCM, back in the 90s. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. With that, we'll get started. As I mentioned before, we're on the third webinar in our series. Our other 2 webinars are available on the EIG website. And if you email us, we'll send you that link, but we'll also be sending you that link at the end of this week so that you will have access to this webinar, and the slides will be sent to you. So our next webinar is February 8th, which is rather rapidly approaching. Please mark your calendars. It'll be the same time. That will be going out. That invitation will be going out this weekend. And then our 5th webinar is on March 15th. And then quickly thereafter on April 5th, we'll have our closeout webinar of this series. With that, Greg?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Jim. Just to give you a thumbnail sketch of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium at Lehigh University. We are now up to 32 companies. There aren't that many on the right side. We keep growing faster than we can build out our placards. There's 32 companies at the moment. That relates to about 1,750 risk professionals around the globe, including Jim and his team. These professionals bring tools, techniques, methodologies, solutions as well to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. What do we provide? On the left-hand side, online education. We have 2 courses through our LMS partners, CLX. We do virtual training like this, many virtual training because of the pandemic. We used to do classroom training face-to-face. I still do it at the universities. We hope to see more and more face-to-face workshops this year. We provide certificates and certifications. We do risk awareness and mitigation for companies. We bring risk and resiliency best practices from our best-selling book. We help coach companies on their journey. We build supply chain war rooms for clients. We bring software as a service solutions, as I said. We also bring platform solutions for supply chain risk and resiliency. And we now have 2 online assessment tools, one of which we're talking about today, and the other is a readiness assessment tool. They bring prescriptive online assessments along with the 90 days. So that gives you a thumbnail sketch of who we are and what we do. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So just a bit of background on Enhance International. We're an exchange of passionate experts to guide transformations to provide self-generating and self-funding results. Our over 50 consultants, companies, and SaaS providers are focused on enabling your enterprise. EIG serves as that master integrator for you to provide you access to the best and brightest companies. We're like a Swiss Army knife. You can look at us. Anything that you have that needs improvement in your company aligned to people, process, data, and technology. We have experts in each of those buckets. Our goal is to meet and exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day self-funding programs. Reviewing the bicycle slide, we like to call it. The EIG model is modeled around these 2 wheels. We have our folks that are focused on strategy and others that are focused more on execution. Of course, you know, we have 2 geared wheels like on a bicycle that you might remember growing up with, where strategy wheel is being the larger of the 2. So 1 rotation results in many rotation cycles of your execution team. And then we have this chain linking the 2 wheels. And so we need to be, we believe that we need to be in sync, otherwise we'll become derailed. And since the front gear strategy moves at a slower rotation, again, we expect those types of activities to be more foundational, and then the execution to have many execution cycles. In summary, a strongly linked strategy to execution ecosystem results in positive momentum for your company employees, customers, suppliers, and stockholders. And we like the quote from Albert Einstein: "Life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep moving." All right, let's get started. So our agenda today. We're going to kick it off with today's VUCA world and W recovery. Then we'll get into the risk appetite overview, some definitions and tactics, and a case study, a 90-day action, a review of our 90-day action plan program, and the benefits of indoctrinating this supply chain risk management program. With that, I think we're on to you, Greg.
Yipper. We're going to talk about the VUCA world and the Wlike recovery, but on the next slide, first, we'd like to get you grounded on what is enterprise resiliency. So let's take a look. We like to think of the definition of a resilient enterprise as an enterprise that has the capacity to overcome disruptions and continually transform itself to meet the challenging needs and expectations of customers, shareholders, and other stakeholders. We'll be honest with you, it's a very tall order, all right? But this is really why. Why would you want to spend any time, money, and resources on building an enterprise resiliency? This is the why. The next definition is the what and the how. We call it supply chain risk management. Both definitions coming from the book. What is supply chain risk management? Again, this is the what and the how to do it. It's the implementation of strategies to manage everyday and exceptional risks throughout your supply chain through continuous risk assessment with the objective of what? Reducing your company vulnerability and ensuring continuity. So think of it this way. View SCRM as the intersection of good, solid supply chain management and risk management. Now for the VUCA. What is the VUCA landscape? Well, we have a build slide here. We'll walk through each definition of the acronym. V stands for volatility. This describes something that is liable to vary or change, sometimes very quickly and often for the worse. So what's that in our arena? That, folks, is COVID-19 and all the government lockdowns. Next, U stands for uncertainty. What is uncertainty? It's the state of not knowing or being able to rely on something. What is that in our supply chain? That has to do with demand and supply shocks that we're all experiencing from COVID-19. The C stands for complexity. This can be defined as something with many parts in an intricate arrangement. What is that? That, folks, is our global supply chain. And then finally, A stands for ambiguity. Something is ambiguous if it is open to more than one interpretation. What does that mean? That is all of the above, folks. That's our landscape at the moment, VUCA landscape, all right? And so I believe we can go to the next slide. We wanted to share this with you from McKinsey. They're doing great, terrific work in support of supply chain risk and resiliency. This is kind of on the right-hand side. It's a graphic footprint of the factors of production determining a value chain's exposure to shocks. That's what this report is all about. It ranks industries by their relative level of exposure on the right-hand side from low to high. So we wanted to share that with you because this is one of the most comprehensive reports across multiple industries relative to supply chain risk and resiliency. So we wanted to share that with you, let you know where it is. If you can get your hands on this report, it'll be terrific. On the left-hand side, why do we use this report? Because essentially, this comes from, their quote comes from this report, and we couldn't say it any better. The report is called Why Investing in Supply Chain Resiliency Pays Off. Their comment in the front and at the end of the report: the COVID-19 pandemic has once again driven the necessity of managing operational and supply chain risks. It's catapulted these issues to the top of CEOs' agendas, and the unexpected now has to be considered probable. We couldn't say it any better. So we wanted to share that with you before we move on. Jim, back to you.
We have our first polling, a response here. What risk events have you experienced on COVID-19? Please log into Poll EV. It's in the chat box, I believe, the link. So if you would please enter in any risk events that you've experienced. since that are you could attribute to COVID-19 that have maybe it's a supply shortage, or it could be stockouts. There we go. Perfect. Stockouts. Anything that's happening with you, especially over the holidays, coming from the Christmas and Thanksgiving in the US and all those holidays, supply shortage. Yeah, that's great. So we're getting shortages. That may be what we've been seeing here in the US are some escalation in pricing. We've had inflation in the US go up 7%, as it's been reported, because of these shortages and stockouts. And there we go, higher prices, canceled interactions. Greg, you have any added comments in here as these are coming in?
All risk events that many of our clients and workshop attendees have articulated in the past. Because remember, folks, I don't have to tell you, the COVID-19 pandemic is getting long in the tooth. We started this, and we'll talk about when we started to actually assist our clients back in May of 2020. So it's getting long in the tooth. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of subsequent slides.
Yeah. We're living that phrase we used to read in our books, in our education books, and we said, oh, that'll never happen. Something called the bullwhip effect. Oh, that'll never happen to us. Now it's not just happening to you, but it's happening to the world. So the shortages that we're receiving are making the textbooks actually correct. It's not just academic now. We're all living that. Not fun for anyone, that's for sure. Not fun at all.
Yep.
Right. Well, thanks everyone for participating. With that, any closing comments on this slide, Greg?
No, it's just we love this Wordle type, folks, because the more frequent the same phrases come in, the larger the font. So it really is. We like this methodology in Poll EV a lot. So we appreciate your contribution and engagement. Thanks.
And you can keep entering in information, and when we have the final copy, we'll see what you all have put into this. So thank you. All right. With that, Greg, I think you're back on here.
Yepper. Yeah, we said we'd talk a little bit more about the Wlike recovery. What is that? Well, this picture going forward to us is more of a continuum. And we built this, Jim and I and the consortium, we built this and started to put this out to our clients and to our workshop attendees virtually back in May of 2020. And again, we have 32 companies, 1,700 risk professionals. Some companies are rather large. They have a big footprint. And we were assimilating a lot of threads of information within the supply chain in February, March, April, and then we rendered an opinion on what we call a Wlike recovery in May of 2020. And I'll just go give you a thumbnail sketch and then we'll move on. On the top of the slide, from left to right, are in blue are the government mandates. You've lived them, I'm sure. The lockdown, the reopen, the first normal, the second lockdown. It's a mess, all right? But that is up on the top of the x-axis. Those are the drivers. On the left-hand side, the y-axis is essentially our segmentation of the global supply-demand arena. What do we mean by that? The orange on the top left is an over-demand for product and an under-supply dilemma. In the middle, in the green, we have our baseline, which is simply supply and demand in relative balance that we're used to. And then on the bottom left is an under demand for product and an oversupply. And then on the bottom x-axis, we put together our perspective in terms of what we looked at regarding business response for these lockdowns and demand supply shocks. Let's just give you a quick thumbnail sketch. As you can see, we recognize that the bullwhip effect would be prevalent for some time going forward. We just didn't know how long, and I'm sure you're thinking about, well, how long will it be? We made this projection in May of 2020. In the respond phase on the bottom left, all right, companies were reducing their product portfolios. They're attempting to keep up the volume to support their good customers, and they are rescaling their supply chains. In the recovery phase, companies are continuing to reduce their portfolios. They're attempting to reinvent their product lines, and they're going after new channels. It kind of exciting, but also frustrating. In the renew phase on the bottom right, many of our clients and companies are now attempting to essentially manage the bullwhip effect, because it has diminished for many industry sectors to a certain degree, and companies are now attempting to ramp up their supply. They're trying to ramp up supply for the pent up demand. All right, still a very difficult situation, folks, and we can talk more about the timeline throughout the session. So I'll turn it back to Jim.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg. And with that, we have another survey on where do you feel your organization resides within each of these three phases? Are you in the response, recover, or renew phase? Again, looking at this chart here, are you responding to some very big perturbations and maybe escalated perturbations with this latest wave? Or are you in recovery in the way that you're reacting today? Or are you actually in renew, where you are proactive? So this latest wave that's come through the world, you guys were on top of it. You were thinking ahead of what's going on. And you took advantage and you gained market share with this latest pandemic. That would be renew, is if you actually gained market share with this latest wave. So if anybody's been able to gain market share out of the latest wave, you'd be in renew. Recovery is you're putting together plans, you're proactively doing that. Looks like 100% of the folks are there right now, which is interesting. And we'll just give it a minute, maybe a minute for other folks to respond. Interesting that everybody feels they're in recover.
And remember, this is Greg. There is no right or wrong answer, folks. We gave you a thumbnail sketch of the description. We know it's not detailed, but you can almost feel it. It's almost tactile. Yeah. In supply chain, you can, there is no right or wrong answer. It's great if you all on the call feel you're in recovery. That's terrific. Fine. Because we've done this several times before for other regions of the world, and it's interesting. It's somewhat regionally oriented, and it's great that the folks are in recovery. That's terrific.
That's great. It kind of makes sense. It does make sense for sure. All right, we're going to move on. Thanks again for participating in the poll. We appreciate it. And if you have any comments or questions that have popped into your head, please do enter them into the chat and or Q&A box. Please do that. We're here for you. Okay, our second section is focused on the impetus for developing the prescriptive 90-day action plan. A lot of this we've already discussed, but we'll just go through it very quickly. Of course, the COVID pandemic, the article that Greg already covered here, why investing in supply chain resiliency pays off, the instability to sit with companies and lead and guide and coach. Of course, we can't walk the hallways like a lot of you can today. It makes it harder to enter into companies. So that's not in the cards, so to speak. And then, the staggering and uneven negative impact of the pandemic on manufacturers. So I'm with a manufacturer now, and they're certainly feeling these demand and supply shocks as we speak. So just a little bit of an overview on this, on the 90-day action plan and our approach. Again, we'll put together a 90-day action plan. It's about 7 hours of investment minimum for you and your team. But there is coaching in there that's more extensive than those 7 hours. So you get extensive coaching, but you drive how you want to be coached in that. And after the survey is completed, which is about 40 hours of coaching for you, the way that you would like to see. So we start off on where are you, the maturity model, who are you, the risk appetite, which we'll talk about today. How do you operate, your operational propensity, and then we'll produce this 90-day action plan along and align it to your current goals of the year. And so it starts off with an onboarding call, which is about an hour and a half or so. We'd like to see 5 to 8 stakeholders complete the survey, and it should be aligned to a business segment, not if you have 5 major divisions, it would be, we would choose one of those divisions where you would like to focus on. Then we have the 90-day action plan report, which will be provided to you with our 5 to 8 action items. And then we'll have check calls after that to make sure that you're aligned. So after we have the call with you on the report, we'll have a call to make sure that you put together a plan that makes sense, and we'll certainly give you guidance on that. And then a check-in call to say how it works, and then a pulse check, and then to close it out. So those are the minimum calls. Of course, there is intermittent consulting in there in any way that you would like to use those 40 hours. And with that, we would just turn it back over to Greg here.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Want to do a little deeper dive on the risk appetite. So with that, we'll move to the next slide and talk a little bit about the risk appetite definition. This is a chief risk officer's perspective. This comes from another McKinsey report back in 2017. As I said, they're doing some great work. And the risk profession, not necessarily us supply chain professionals, the risk profession has defined risk appetite as this: the aggregate level and types of risk a board of directors and management are willing to assume to achieve their strategic objectives and their business plans consistent with capital, liquidity, and other regulatory requirements. Okay, pretty long definition. It comes from the risk profession. The net, folks, is risk appetite is all about culture. All right, that's what makes it unique. And so with that, we'll go to the next slide. This man, according to us, said it best. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. This is one of the main differences between our profession in supply chain management and operations performance versus risk management. Risk is all about culture. Just want to get that perfectly clear. It's a very interesting and dynamic environment. And with that, we'll move on and talk just a little bit now about the risk appetite profile. All right. And I'll begin with giving you a profile of the risk appetite chart coming out of the 90-day report. And then Jim will kind of dig deeper into some of the elements. But just to give you a sense of the graph, on the left of the graph, the y-axis, it's what we call risk tolerance from low to high. You can see that. It's kind of the maximum degree, maybe, of uncertainty someone is willing to accept. Again, the definition of risk appetite, when you're making a decision that entails the probability of a loss to your company. All right. The next element on the y-axis is a risk viewpoint. Again, from I treat risk as a negative, it's bad, I'm risk averse, all the way up to the top where I'm looking at risk as a positive opportunity. So if you're risk averse, that's you want to minimize or totally avoid any risk that can produce a loss. If you're looking at risk, which is a two-sided coin, if you're looking at it from an opportunity point of view, you're viewing risk as an opportunity to exploit, as we said, to potentially garner new market share from your competitors. And then on the x-axis, we have the risk management decision tactics that tend to support those four ovals, which we call risk perspectives, which Jim will talk about in a minute. So I just wanted to kind of get you grounded on the Y and X axis, and then Jim's going to dig deeper into the perspectives. Jim?
Actually, you'll cover the different four perspectives first.
Okay, I can do that.
Right.
That's fine. I'm staring at Jim's face here on the slide going, hey, that's not Greg. Little levity there, folks. Little levity.
Sorry.
Little levity. All right. We have four basic perspectives. All right. In terms of how companies tend to perceive risk in their organization. So the orange on the left side, pragmatists. These folks wait until the very last minute to decide on a decision that actually has risk involved. So they're basically, pragmatists are reactionary. The blue, dark blue on the bottom, conservators, we call them. Their biggest concern is avoiding a loss. They're very careful to avoid a risk to the bottom line. So they're obviously very conservative and are always concerned about a loss, bottom line loss. The light blue in the middle, managers. These folks are careful to balance risk and rewards. They utilize many tools and techniques to quantify the risk. And like a good manager, they're balancing trade-offs between risk and reward. And then finally, on the top right, the, I'll say blue, light blue, gray, maximizers. All right. Tough color. You know, if you're colorblind on this slide, it's really brutal. Again, little levity. Maximizers. These folks look at big risks, give big rewards. They go for the gusto. They're very proactive. We call them gamers. All right. They look at risk and reward and say, there's an opportunity, let's go get it. So we wanted to give you those four perspectives and a quick thumbnail sketch of each one. All right.
Yeah. And you could look at the gamers as, you know, the Bitcoin folks, the high tech folks, they're willing to take risks. They're more cutting edge, tends to be, as we have noticed. So for risk decision tactics on the x-axis, you know, you can do nothing. You know, simply stated, you know, the tactic tends as to be an ad hoc approach to risk. When they arise, there's no formal process, and deciding not to decide can be a decision. That's the nothing, doing nothing, waiting for it to happen. Lost control. So the second one on the x-axis is the most traditional form of risk management, driven by consensus. So we just let the team make the consensus, but you're losing a bit of control. Risk steering is, you know, the next one in the middle is driven by a rigorous analysis, cost benefit analysis, a rewards approach, rigorous, you know, it's that rigor. That's the true ERM, enterprise risk management approach. And you attempt to discover and implement a balance. So you're really trying to move yourself into that manager role where you're managing risk proactively. And then at the end of that, in that next section of diversifying, here you're trying to pull a little bit harder to, once this is mastered, the tactic spreads the risk across multiple classes to mitigate. So you're going to spread that exposure across various classes of risk to mitigate loss. And you maximize your flexibility and minimize your exposure. So here you're doing that balancing act and creating that shared risk tactic. Then the far right is you accept risk, you look for risk as an appetite, and you're saying, gosh, complicated risk modeling and risk reward, profits and losses, my friend. I like to see that. I'm going to capitalize on that. The exemplars are masters at taking on risk as an opportunity. They talk about risk every single moment of the day. They outmaneuver the competition and capitalize on it many times, and they capitalize on risk that are very high to everyone else. So that's the maximizers. And again, as Greg said over and over again, there is no right and wrong here. It's who you are. May you want to move over, from pragmatists to conservatives to managers to maximize. You may not. It's all in your business plan. It's in your industry. It's how you want to operate your company. But you are what you are, and no matter what, you need to work on how do you work with this where you are today, and not take it as a negative. Don't dwell on where you are. You'd rather be somewhere else. Take it on and address it appropriately. Okay, so with that, as you heard those definitions, and I'll put them up there, we'd love to get your feedback to see a rank, because you might not say, well, I'm kind of in between risk steering, loss control, maybe rank the first 2 or 3. You might not have to rank all of them. We're asking you to, of where you think you are. It could be just your first and second. That's fine in this next survey. Are you doing nothing? Are you waiting for the risk to occur? Are you lost control? Are you risk steering? Are you steering a bit? You're using some types of risk methodologies. Are you diversifying your risk? Or do you look at risk as your complete friend? You love it, and that's how your business is built. So again, this is a ranking type of a survey, a little bit more complicated. And for this, we're not going to ask you to rank all of them. Just rank maybe the first 2 or 3 where you think you are today in your company. So with that, we'll give you a few minutes. Greg, welcome your commentary as we wait for people to respond for this more difficult wave survey. So this is the first time we've tried this. So we have at least one respondent saying they accept risk and they're on that risk steering. So they're risk accepting. That's good. Gives us a little bit. We got maybe somebody likes risk out there, and they steer their risk. So they're on towards the right hand side. It looks like risk steering here. So they're looking at things. This lets us know a lot about who's here. So it looks like we have maybe some exemplars on the call here that are looking at risk is my friend. That's beautiful. But if you're, don't be ashamed if you're A or B. Don't be ashamed because there is no right or wrong. I think the diversifying is in doing nothing or at the bottom here. It's very interesting. Risk steering and risk accepting are at the top. Greg, any thoughts?
No, it's very, very interesting. as we constantly say, there's no right or wrong, just different. Every company, if it's not intuitively obvious, every company has a different set of risk appetites and tolerance levels, folks. We've seen that in 12 years worth of teaching these concepts. So not to worry, it's very encouraging to us, folks who are on the call today, that they're exercising tactics like risk steering and risk accepting, which implies to us that you have some methodologies that you are exercising when it comes to risk. That's terrific. That's very, very good. We appreciate your engagement. Thanks.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll move on, but keep answering the survey if you haven't had a chance. Don't give up on us, because we'd love to see more and more responses. Thanks so much. All right, so we just want to give you, again, to reinforce what we just discussed, the positioning of the risk appetite persona for your organization involves your cross-functional team. And that includes finance, sales, marketing, supply chain, procurement. It's across much of the C-suite of the organization is involved in, your companies and how you manage risk in your company. So as we see that the risk appetite will superimpose your company onto this chart, and we have some insights on what is the perspective on risk and your risk decision tactics, of course, and the tolerance profile. So what happens is when we do have you complete the survey, you may end up being a pragmatist or a conservator or a manager or maximizer, but more times than not, you could end up being between two of these. You could be what we call prag conserve. You could be, between those two areas, or you could just be a conservator. I mean, a manager, I should say. And it may be a little bit lower than where that shows up. Or you could be between manager and maximizer. So there is no right or wrong here. The key is, who you are and what you are, and that's the most important thing that this exercise does. And then we can talk about how we are going to help you become more proactive in your risk journey. With that, Greg, we'll go through a case study.
Yep, and just a quick follow-up on the graphs that you've seen. Again, no right or wrong answer. The reason we focus on understanding your organization's risk appetite is because many of our workshop attendees and even clients aren't sure exactly what the company's risk appetite is. So we try to codify that for you. If you are the tip of the spear and you are a change agent to embed risk into your company, we're compelled to give you a sense of your company's risk appetite so that we can ensure your success if you're going to stick your chin out and say, we should be doing this. That's really the main element, or the main reason why we go through this exercise with clients and workshop folks. So yeah, we have a case study on the next slide. We've done a heck of a lot of alphas over the months. We've done a heck of a lot of beta companies. We're now live. We have several different companies from several different industry sectors engaging in the tool. This one just happens to be a consumer package or consumer product group company. All right, CPG. All right. As you can see, we use the same graphic that you've been looking at. The color code's a little different. The the red are maximizers, blue managers, yellow pragmatists, and green are conservators. And then as Jim walked you through some of the animated slides, this particular company, this CPG company, fit basically in the bottom left-hand quadrant. And you can see, we called them pragmatist, conservator. You can have two different approaches. You can be touching several. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're a large organization like this company was. All right. And essentially, we just wanted to make sure that you understand that you do not have to be one or the other. You can touch several different perspectives based on the scope and scale and size of your company. So I think we have another slide which gives you a little more insight on this consumer products group.
Yeah,
and so we'll talk. Yeah.
Before we get to that, we have a question in here. Asking, what sort of question do you use to assess where you are on the chart? What's the complexion of how we ask the questions?
Boy, that's well, I think if you're talking about the survey methodology, it essentially goes through questions of discovery using a sliding scale from left to right. You know, the type of, and Jim, you helped build it as well. It goes from, go ahead.
Yeah, it goes from 1 to 9, but I think the key is the questions are based about how do you feel in these situations. So you don't have to be an expert in risk appetite. They're situational type questions of how do you feel. So we purposely made them such that if you're in that senior leadership position, it's around that. They're not technical as do you know. We're not asking you, do you know are you risk steering? You will not see a question in there that says, are you risk steering? We will not say that. We define risk steering this way. How do you feel about that? No, they're all situational and they're very simplistic type questions. So you don't have to have knowledge of risk appetite in order to fill out the survey. We purposely made it that way. Greg, any additional thoughts on that?
Jim is exactly right. We're trying to get your perspective. And the beauty is we try to get perspectives from different disciplines within your company. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because again, we've been doing this for 12 years. So hopefully we answered your question. It's more about touchy-feely a little bit. You know, I hate to use that, but risk is all about culture and perspective and, you know, and opinion. So that's the approach we take. Hopefully we answered.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you so much for asking that question. Sometimes we go so fast, we don't even cover that point. So thank you.
Yep, all good. We're still on a consumer packaged goods user feedback from the tool. All right, so we're going to share this with you. This is what this company looked like from a supply chain risk and resiliency maturity model. If you've been on several of our previous webinars, we have a 5-stage maturity model. This particular company, the red little icon is your as-is condition for this company. And then the black during the survey is where would you like to be? Kind of a future to be kind of question. And that is the black icon. So this organization is in the early stages of visibility. And here were some of their comments. Although we've been at this for about 3 years, we're still at the beginning of visibility. They agreed with the tool's assessment. We're a global company spanning 200 countries, very, very big and very diverse. All right. We also are a small startup company, so they have multiple threads going on within this organization. That's why their risk appetite tended to touch 2 or 3 different perspectives. We're not looking past the visibility stage in terms of our 2B. That's not us, that is the user giving us the feedback. And then on the risk appetite profile, they looked like this. Again, there they are, touching pragmatist, conservator, and even manager. They agreed. We're probably pragmatist conservators. We're somewhat risk averse in making decisions. We are who we are. And with our change in leadership, that we're going through a leadership change, we expect that will not change. Culture. We are moving to a more risk culture. That was a statement by them, not right or no right or wrong. We are somewhat reactionary. We wait until the very last minute. There is a sense that we want to change, but that was coming from the actual user community. So we wanted to share with you feedback from a very large global CPG company who went through the survey.
Excellent. So if there's any questions on that, please let us know. With that, I just wrap up this section on risk appetite. And, again, there's no good or bad of where you're at. Don't be concerned if your company has multiple risk perspectives. That's all natural. You may want to progress or you may not want to progress. You may be happy where you're at. That's fine. It is what it is. The supply chain project lead but of course you need to understand this, as well as your key stakeholders need to understand where you're at. That needs to be communicated. Everybody has to be comfortable to call yourself prag, conserve, whatever it is, or a conservator. You need to be comfortable in your own skin, so that when you are executing the action plan, you know who you are in your culture of your company. And then, of course, this methodology helps provide those risk constraints and tolerances as a roll out to journey, as I just mentioned. And of course, risk appetite is essential to the success of your journey. Again, you need to understand and manage expectations of what your company can handle and what it cannot handle in taking on risk. And saying red is good in a company can sometimes take, some companies it takes 3 months to say that. Other companies it takes 2 years to say red is good, and there's no right or wrong. It's just what it is. And with that, just a brief overview of the 90-day action plan again. It provides you where you are, the maturity model, who you are, the risk appetite, and what we'll talk about on our next webinar, how you operate. And then we'll go into providing you examples of 90-day action plans and how everything fits together, and you create a persona for your company. So this is, we call it a persona of your company from a risk perspective. With that, Greg?
You bet. We want to finish up with a couple of thoughts in terms of the ask and the get and the benefits. So we'll move on to the ask slide, I believe. What's the ask? You can fire away, Jim. We asked for 5 to 8 executives from your company to fill out the 90 questions. We're looking for diversity. Could the executives be department heads from different disciplines? So we're looking for diversity across the organization. We would like to have the executives who fill in the survey from the same division and or the same product line. We like to keep it homogeneous, even though we're looking for diversity, because we know diversity comes within, when you talk about risk, the diversity comes from your perspective in terms of what you've experienced in risk in your professional career and where you are positioned within your organization. So we know that to be a fact. That's what we mean by diversity. That's basically the ask. What's the get look like? Looks like this. You get a sense of where you are, as Jim said. On the maturity model, you get a sense of who you are, the risk appetite. You get a sense of how you operate, which is, again, culture, your operational propensity. You get an aligned 90-day action plan to survive and thrive in COVID and beyond. That's the 5 to 8 action items based on your profile of the 3 graphs. And then I believe we have essentially a bonus. You do get strategic advantage to the bottom line once you understand where you are, who you are, how you operate, and to get started on that 90-day plan. And a bonus benefit for every company that provides 5 or more executives to fill in the survey tool, that the consortium will offer your company 1 free pass to our supply chain risk and resiliency online course, which culminates in a certificate of achievement from Lehigh University.
And Greg, we just have another question come in when it gets to that before the top of the hour. The question is, are there companies that you look at their profile and you coach them to be more risk accepting?
That's a good question. That's the $64,000 question. We do that, just for the folks on the call. We do that with executive meetings and executive consultancy. We essentially identify who you are, where you are, and your operational propensity. We do like to inject a dialogue about a company's nearest competitor and go through the same dialogue. And the 2 Venn diagrams never touch. They're never equal. And boy, does that essentially bring up a 2-hour executive discussion in terms of what does the nearest competitor do? What is their risk appetite? So we don't press the issue because there is no right or wrong, but we do enlighten the organization in terms of what their nearest competitor looks like and how do you feel about attempting to move towards that nearest competitor, which again, the risk appetite profile never touches. Hopefully I answered your question.
Great response, Greg. Thank you.
All right. I think we have one more set of slides, one more slide. We just want to share with you the benefits of indoctrinating essentially an SCRM program just from our 12 years of experience. This comes from exemplars, comes from leader companies, average companies. Here's what we've seen. The benefits, 1, are cost reduction. Your insurance premiums can be reduced. We've seen this with many clients and the exemplars. Why? Because you have a robust supply chain risk management program. Many exemplars automate their workflow in terms of risk, so you have a repeatable quality process. We have another benefit that we've seen, cost avoidance. This is effective risk detection. Probably the exemplars are 17 to 20% better than the average. And the reason this is important is because in risk management, speed is life. The next element is working capital. Good SCRM impacts positively impact working capital. The exemplars who who exercise SCRM programs have 94% cash flow forecasting accuracy. That's 13% higher than the average. And they free up more cash, 10 to 30%, based on their cost avoidance and their cost reduction associated with the SCRM program. 2 more. We advocate cash conversion cycle. If you don't use it in supply chain, go to Wikipedia and look at it. It's easy to calculate. Most SCRM program exemplars have improved their cash conversion cycle anywhere from 10 to 20%. And then finally, we have another one, Altman Z-score. This is a tool and technique. It's been around for 40 years. It's a bankruptcy predicting methodology, has a 90% accuracy level to predicting bankruptcy 12 to 15 months into the future. Who wouldn't want that as a dashboard for their suppliers and customers? So you can find that on Wikipedia as well. Our parting thought to you is, our mantra is think big, start small, and act fast. Back to you, Jim.
And so with that, we'll close out the webinar. If there's no more questions, again, we'll be back at this same time on February 8th. And we look forward to seeing you there when we talk about operational propensity. And then we have 2 more webinars to finish this series. Thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate your taking the time in this new year as we kick it off. We're here to support you and your team and anything that you're looking for. Thanks so much. For me from LA and Greg from
New Jersey.
New Jersey, we got you covered. And our friends in South Africa, we're here to help. Anything, closing comments, Greg?
Just thanks very much for everyone attending. Again, it's our passion, and we hope to see you on the upcoming webinar when we talk about operational propensity, or what's the shape of your company culture kite. Looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.